Hey everyone, welcome to the Eat to Win show where sports nutrition meets peak performance. Get ready for expert insights, real stories, and tips to help you win with every meal. Let's dive in.
Hello, and welcome to the Winner's Circle and the Eat to Win podcast show. My name is Margaret Downs, and I am a registered dietitian. I'm board certified in sports nutrition, and we are here to talk about all things sports nutrition and how we help athletes win. Today, we are joined by Nichole Heppner. She is a dietitian with a master's degree of science. She has also gotten her master's degree in sports nutrition, and she works as a private practitioner in any kind of general area of practice, but has dedicated a good number of years to also the expertise of sports nutrition. So we're really excited to have Nichole with us today. She has a wealth of knowledge, specifically talking about weight training as this relates to women's health, preserving muscle mass, and addressing the metabolic and nutritional changes that women face during menopause. So we're really excited to hear from Nichole today, and let's dive into her insights. Welcome, Nichole. It's great to see you this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me, Margaret. I'm looking forward to this chat.
Yes. Well, we are super excited to hear from you today and your contributions to our show. And so, first of all, I always like to kind of start out with what inspired you into this area of practice with respect to sports nutrition, women's health, weight training, maintaining muscle mass, and how that definitely affects women. So give us a little insight into terms of how you've gotten here today.
Yeah, for sure. So I trained myself. I had always done endurance training. I was kind of going through a difficult time of my life. I was going through a divorce, and one of my good friends convinced me to get into bodybuilding. So I hired a coach. I did my first show, and I was just kind of amazed at how my body transformed, how much stronger I was. So that convinced me to go back to school. I went back to school and I got my master's in sports nutrition. And I just loved how feeling strong is the best confidence booster. So I kind of wanted to dive more and help other women learn this new kind of way of training and eating to build muscle mass.
Yeah, well, that is an interesting background and also pathway to kind of get where you have gone. I know you're also a clinical consultant, that you do kind of a number of different things in practice. And so with respect to some of the challenges that you have maybe encountered with this topic of weight training in women, especially, tell us a little bit about what women think when you're discussing this topic with them and how you might get around some of the challenges that you face.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of misconception where women think that, weight training, they're going to look like a man, which obviously it's not the case. With natural bodybuilding and especially with building muscle mass, you're going to look denser. It's leaner tissue versus fat takes up more volume. So in other ways, you're going to look smaller rather than larger. And then a lot of, miscommunication on protein needs, the fear that too much protein is going to hurt their kidneys. As long as we have healthy kidneys, there's no issues from that standpoint.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting too, because muscle weighs more than fat. And so one of the things I've always run into with women is, oh, this muscle's going to make me weigh more, right? Even though you have this aesthetic look of leanness. Yeah. The thing that I found women got really hung up on was the number on the scale. So how do you get around that with them?
I mean, for some women, I even tell them, just don't weigh yourself. If it's going to be a trigger for you, we kind of avoid that when we check in and just go with measurements. Measurements and photos can tell you so much rather than what the scale is. Just a small piece of the puzzle. A lot of times we kind of focus on standardized measures too. So we'll all encourage a DEXA scan so we can look at bone density and body fat percentage versus just great. What the scale is saying.
Yeah, because that lean tissue definitely does look different, right?
Yes.
Versus the weight and the number on that scale, which does just throws people off for some reason. So why do you find that weight training is so important for this population? And how does nutrition play a role in supporting that?
Yeah, so weight training is very vital during this time of our life. It will help with our metabolism, increase metabolic health, bone density, also help with cardiovascular health, which is the number one cause of death for females. So it's huge to kind of combat all those things and the challenges that we're going to be up against when we're going through menopause, which, is osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease. So strength training is going to be kind of our number one weapon to help us fight during this kind of transition of our lives.
Just so important. And I mean, is there an age that you would say, hey, I think, when you're 18, it would be a good time to start lifting weights? I mean, at what point do you think women really need to start adhering to a weight training program to help with this, not only development of lean mass, but also the maintenance of it?
Yeah. I mean, I would encourage women at 18. I feel like a lot of women, are kind of a little timid in the weight room. And I would highly encourage, invest in yourself, get a personal trainer, learn how to do those compound movements, and really understand nutrition too, to build muscle mass. Cause you can be lifting all the weights in the gym, but if you're under fueling, you're not going to build muscle. So like the two components are huge together.
Yeah. And that's a great point with the fueling aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about how nutrition does play a role in this muscle development for the women that you're seeing, and how do you recommend they eat?
Yeah, for sure. So protein, obviously focusing on lean sources of protein and making sure we're having adequate protein. I usually, at a minimum, 1.2 grams per kilogram is where I would start. 30 grams with most meals and 15 to 20 grams for our snacks. Also making sure we're having a decent amount of carbohydrates. That's what's going to fuel our performance in the gym as well. And making sure like we have good recovery too. So making sure that we're having adequate recovery days as well. And also just making sure we're not overdoing the cardio. I think that's another thing that a lot of women do is, they're building lifted weights, but then they're overdoing the cardio, and then they're not really seeing any results. So just encouraging walking, minimal list training, and, not running a marathon while we're trying to build muscle. It's just not going to go together.
Yeah. So, not exerting so many calories when you're trying to consume enough to gain lean mass. And, that is another barrier and often a point of resistance for women is, oh, you're making me eat too much.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And there's a lot of fear with women and eating too much. And, and it's just, it has to be a very slow progression towards just slowly increasing food is what I've come to realize.
And do you feel like there's a misconception around how much women need to be eating for their physique and their health?
Huge. Yes. I feel like, it's just social media. Everything's just kind of been said that, women should just be eating salads, which, that's not going to build muscle, but just having a very low caloric diet.
Yeah. We know energy is that primary, source of fuel. And so we really have to get that energy in there. Understanding that can be a really big challenge, working for people who are trying to lose weight or convert weight, right? So how does this play a role in weight loss? So let's say a woman comes to you, she says, I want to lose 10 pounds. And you're saying, I really want to give you some approaches to do that. Tell me a little bit about how your approach with weight loss would kind of feed into, let's talk about putting on some lean mass.
Yeah. First, I'd want to see what their diet looks like now and kind of encourage them to log for a couple of weeks just so we can kind of see what they're actually intaking. A lot of people are very low on protein, a little too high in fats and not the good fats. So just kind of letting me see an idea of their overall diet would be a great place to start. And then a lot of times it's more like, what can I add to your diet versus what can I take away? So starting there and seeing what I can encourage them to add into their diet and going slow. I know a lot of females, like I said, they're used to not eating enough. So going too big, too fast, they're just going to get scared and kind of walk away. So going slow, kind of meeting someone where they are would be the first place I would start. And then slowly bringing up the conversation of weight training. I feel like, again, a lot of women are afraid of it. So kind of showing them the research and educating them on how, no, this is the best way for fat loss is if we go in this direction versus, running 6 miles every day.
Right. And I mean, has it been your experience when women are under eating that it becomes very difficult for them to lose weight? I mean, have you seen under eating be one of those stubborn areas for people or not?
Yeah, I have. And I've seen under eating and overtraining. It kind of goes hand in hand. I feel like they kind of are a combination together, which, kind of is mass destruction on our metabolism. So just
Right.
kind of treating them where they are, giving them the education and kind of letting them know, like, we need to have proper rest days and recovery to actually build the muscle mass. And we have to be fueling ourselves adequately as well to see the progress in the gym. And really focusing on, I think once women kind of get that and it clicks and they start feeling stronger, then that's when the confidence gets to them. And then they start slowly, believing in the process and kind of, actually taking my word from then on.
Yeah. Like their readiness to change shifts at that point when they start
100%.
seeing those results. And I think that's a really great point. It's also a really great stopping point. We're going to take a quick break. Stay with us while we take a short break to thank our sponsors. You are listening to Eat to Win podcast show with your host, Margaret Downs. Liquid Fuel is a new sports and hydration product formulated by a sports dietitian to give athletes the edge to train and compete longer. It contains low glycemic carbohydrate platinose designed to keep blood sugar levels more stable, to provide energy for 3 to 4 hours without the blood sugar crash seen in other leading sports drinks. Its unique 4-part electrolyte formula includes 50% of your daily magnesium need to optimize muscle function. Liquid Fuel is naturally sweetened, along with no artificial ingredients or colors. Currently being used by high school, collegiate, and professional teams, Liquid Fuel allows you to live life with confidence, knowing you're properly fueling your body. Visit drinkliquidfuel.com and use the code MSD10 to get 10% off your order. Welcome back to the Eat to Win podcast, where we are talking with Nichole Heppner about sports nutrition for women and navigating some of the changes that happen during menopause. So let's dive back in. And before our break, Nichole was giving us some great insights to weight training, especially for women, and some of the benefits that can come from that long term. And so let's shift gears a little bit here and talk a little bit about menopause. This topic has really just gone mainstream in the last few years. We've seen a lot of information coming out in media in general about menopause. I know when I was coming into practice, everyone was saying, stay away from those hormones. Don't go on to hormone replacement. And now this is kind of shifting again. And we're seeing some really good information coming about with respect to how to help women at this stage. So tell me a little bit about your experience working with menopausal women, and how does weight training play a role in working with this age group?
Yeah, well, weight training plays a huge role with helping increase our metabolism, which, as we age, it's going to decline, as with muscle mass is declining. So really emphasizing strength training, I always suggest at least a minimum of 3 times a week is what we focus on. And then a diet to help build muscle mass. So really focusing on leucine rich proteins post-workout, helping them understand, really focusing on a whole food diet to minimize processed foods as best as we can too, and really minimize alcohol too. That's kind of another precursor with when we're going through menopause. Sleep is already going to be an issue with the hot flashes, the night sweats, and alcohol is just going to further hindrance that as well. So kind of making sure that diet and everything kind of aligns to help support building muscle mass.
So do you recommend that women just quit drinking, or is there any, like the American diet, the dietary guidelines for Americans, are we still staying within that structure of 1 drink a day or something of that nature?
Ultimately, I'll leave it up to that client and then just kind of give them my research and what they want to do with it. But I would minimize it as much as possible, especially during this phase of life.
Yeah. Interesting. So, gosh, alcohol is just way up there with that, the top consumed beverages in the American culture. So I know that has to certainly be a challenge, trying to get people to stop drinking and or limit their drinking. Of course, at 50, I'm sure people are maybe ready for that change.
Yeah.
Unlike maybe a college age female.
Yes. Yeah.
Are there any, I mean, you just mentioned a few key nutrients that you would definitely recommend, different levels of intake potentially for. Are there any other key nutrients that you would consider concerning for a woman of menopausal age?
Concerning, I mean, there has been some research suggest that like I guess it wouldn't be a nutrient, but different like spicy foods will aggravate hot flashes, caffeine. We already talked about alcohol. So those kind of three things, minimizing those in our diet as
What
best as
about
we
the
can.
calcium and the vitamin D, maybe specifically? I mean, understanding that as we roll over into, after 50, that we're
Yeah.
seeing, okay, now we have, especially in athletes, now we have a higher risk of maybe, fractures. When we're dealing with bone deterioration and having those types of things happen, are there any varying recommendations for calcium or vitamin D?
Yes, those would be recommended, obviously, because, going through menopause puts us at risk of osteoporosis. So being on calcium and vitamin D would be highly supportive during that phase of our life, having calcium-rich foods, vitamin D-rich foods, also focusing on heart-healthy fats too. Like I said, cardiovascular risk is huge during this time. So really
Yeah.
making sure we're having heart healthy fats in our diet, avocado, nuts, seeds, that stand. And usually magnesium would be another one that I would suggest, helps convert the active form of vitamin D into calcium in our bones. And then also magnesium can help with sleep, which is disrupted during this time of our life as well.
Yes. Slow builders versus fast gainers. I mean, how much time should a woman expect to see results from introducing herself into a brand new weight training program?
Yeah, well, there is such a thing as newbie gains. So I feel like that can be happening within like the first 3 months, but I would ideally, give yourself at least 6 months of following a solid nutrition plan and a weight training program before you're going to see results.
Okay. That's a fair assessment. I mean, that's a commitment too, right? So are you generally working with women for 6 months or longer in your
Yes.
practice?
Yep. At least 6 months or longer. And some of the
That's
changes I've
great.
seen have just been huge. I've had a lot of females that, they're only kind of comfortable with their at-home gyms. And, eventually I got her up to get enough confidence to get a gym membership. And like her body transformation is huge from going
Oh,
from
that's
at-home
terrific.
workouts to going to gym and following the program there. It's been amazing.
Oh, that's terrific. And so again, you're seeing those kind of stages of change and then, higher levels of commitment because of the
Yeah.
results they're getting. And I think that, really brings up a great point about how long to stick with and then to achieve result, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you have someone who's encouraging you and you're accountable to, and you have, a good relationship with. So, what is a key takeaway that you would like to leave our audience with in respect to any topic that we've discussed, or one or two takeaways that you'd like to leave our listeners with, Nichole?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to lift heavy weights. I mean, women, we deserve to be in that section of the weight room just as much as the men do. So, don't be discouraged, invest in yourself. I feel like a lot of females, especially moms, they feel guilty with, taking that time away on themselves. But, in all honesty, you're going to be a better mom, a better spouse with kind of really navigating this area of your life. You're going to have more energy to kind of do all the things that you need to do in life as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure it is a learning curve for a lot of people. Plus, it can be intimidating. And you don't want people to get injured. So in some cases, do you work with personal trainers or other allied health professionals?
Yes. I do have personal trainers that I will recommend clients to if they're local with me.
Okay, great. Well, Nichole, we also want to leave our listeners with your contact information so that they know how to reach you and get in touch with you if they have an interest in doing so. So would you mind sharing your best contact email or what is the best website to connect with you?
Yeah, of course. My website is just www.remotesportsdietitian.com. And then my email is the same, remotesportsdietitian@gmail.com. And Instagram is remotesportsdietitian.
Good, good. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We've really enjoyed our conversation. Look forward to hopefully having you back at some point. And if there are no further questions or any insights to leave, we are going to end our show today. So that is it for today's episode of the Eat to Win podcast show. We want to give and extend a huge thank you to Nichole Heppner for sharing her expertise on sports nutrition with us, especially as it relates to weight training, women's health, and navigating through menopause. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with your community. And until next time, keep winning.
Thanks for joining us on the Eat to Win show. Remember, every meal is a step toward victory. Until next time, stay strong and keep winning.